Voilà, 14h30, c'est l'heure de notre troisième table ronde du Borders Forum. Bienvenue à tous avec de nouveaux invités et un grand prix des initiatives transfrontalières. N'hésitez pas d'ailleurs à envoyer vos questions comme vous l'avez très bien fait ce matin. On a eu quand même une trentaine de questions pour nos panélistes, bien sûr. Et puis, je rappelle que les débats seront traduits en français, en anglais, en allemand. Il faut cliquer sur la bonne langue pour nous suivre, bien sûr, celle qui est votre langue de travail. Après 30 ans de coopération transfrontalière, les territoires frontaliers sont les premières victimes de la crise du Covid et de la crise économique, mais ce sont aussi des vecteurs de solutions à travers les groupements européens de coopération territoriale en particulier. Alors, quel rôle ont-ils joué activement sur le terrain? Du jour au lendemain, des États membres se sont retrouvés à fermer leurs frontières et à offrir finalement peu de perspectives à ces régions frontalières.
This meant that those border regions didn't know what to do. There were some issues in the area of the medical healthcare sector, but also geriatrics. We're going to talk with some experts today. We have Isabelle Boudineau. Good afternoon. You are president of the COTER Commission. You are the coordinator of the EGTC Platform, and you are at the European Committee of the Region, so you are in charge of coordinating all those best practices. We also have François Calvet. Good afternoon, François Calvet. You are the member of the French Senate for the Pyrénées-Orientales, and you are also the president of the Cerdanya Hospital EGTC Support Committee between Spain and France. So we're going to travel thanks to those cross-border initiatives. We also have Zoltán Bara. Good afternoon. You are the director of the Pons Danubii EGTC. And we also have with us today Sandra Sodini, Director of EGTC Interregional International Relations, and this is the Friuli, Venezia, Giulia region, member of the Senza Confini EGTC. This is between Italy and Austria. And we also have a fifth guest, Jorg Saalbach, for the Rhine-Alpine corridor EGTC. Good afternoon, Mr. Saalbach. Thank you for being with us today. So, quite a few groupings, quite a few languages. I would like to ask you the question to start this roundtable. Can you tell us how, at your level, at your grouping, how did you experience this COVID crisis that deeply impacted your territories, as I know? I'm going to ask a question to Mrs. Boudineau first, as she has maybe more of an overall overview. Thank you. Well, let me say a few words by way of introduction before I answer your question. This was heard this morning, but for those of you who haven't heard it, we had all said that there were no longer any internal borders and that they would not come back. Then with terror attacks, with the refugee crisis, this main principle of having open borders started eroding. And then we had the COVID crisis that led to some strict border closures. This also impacted cross-border collaboration, and it also overturned the life of many of our citizens, which became extremely difficult. So we launched a platform dedicated to the impact of COVID. And as you said, and I'm sure we're going to see this in the examples that are going to be presented this afternoon, we were all severely impacted by this crisis. And the COVID-19 platform obviously zoomed onto cross-border regions and the ones that were on the front line. The Committee of the Regions didn't work in isolation. It worked together with DG Regio and also with all associations that work in the area of cross-border collaboration in Europe, those that are coordinating today's event. We pooled our resources and we published many feedbacks, articles on this platform. We thought we shouldn't only talk about examples associated with the COVID crisis, but we should also talk about all the efforts done in order to help the economy recover. As of today, we have 100 narratives that have been published. They are available on this website. This is the website of the Committee of the Regions. And beyond those experiences that show that cross-border cooperation is most often the best solution, the suitable solution. We have decided to be better structured and to lobby more in order to be better prepared in the future, in order to foster our cross-border cooperation. Maybe we hadn't shown how efficient that could be in the past, so we needed to put more effort into this. And I believe that governments didn't consult sufficiently the regions that were impacted by the decisions that had been taken. And the decision to close borders that really made everything more complicated, the management of crisis and then the recovery from this crisis. And I believe that the Alliance will be the perfect forum to do this. Let me say a few words about the EGTCs. EGTCs are indispensable in order to strengthen cross-border cooperation. At the Committee of the Regions, we very much work based on those EGTCs. They provide the right framework in order to cooperate better. They also allow for innovation. Today, in the EU, there are 79 EGCTs, more than 1,000 local and regional local governments in 20 member states, and also in 3 third countries. In total, we believe that they impact the lives of 30 million people in Europe. As I said, they have been an excellent tool in order to innovate at the level of the territories in many areas, healthcare, but also tourism, environmental protection, and it is also a tool that is suitable to implement the project of the EU. It is an extremely dynamic project, and right now 25 new EGCTs are being prepared. So, together with them at the Committee of the Regions, we are very happy to be celebrating the 10th anniversary of the EGTC Platform, which really shows how much has been done during those past 10 years. We will also would like to highlight the fact that EGCTs are multi-factor tools. They are polyvalent. And we need to make sure that people understand that they are important structures that work together with associations, with citizens, with companies, with the economic sector. They are there to support citizens and to help cities and regions to make sure that they provide people with a pleasant environment. Those EGTCs have been in existence for 10 years only, but they have already proven quite efficient. And it's important that they can reach their full potential. To conclude this brief introduction, I would like to add that innovative public policies that are being seen today really prove that this cross-border cooperation really has to be at the heart of the European project. Yes, indeed. We are going to talk about those best practices. We're going to talk about resilience, the resilience of this cross-border sector. Together with you, François Calvet, you are the Senator for the Pyrénées-Orientales, and you are the President of the Support Committee of the Cerdanya Hospital between Spain and France. So during the current COVID crisis that has a lot of impact on the healthcare sector. You probably have a lot to say about those groupings, about the way this cross-border approach should be managed. Yes, indeed. Mrs. Boudineau has really explained things very well about EGTCs. It all started out in 1996 in our case, and I won't give you the detailed background, but thanks to Jacques Goblat at the time, who was the president of the Languedoc-Roussillon region, we were able to start working on this. Gradually, discussions were held at the level of the ministers with Mr. Dousteau-Blazy, Mr. Bertrand, and Jean Castex, who at the time was in charge of hospitals at the level of the ministry. So we got in touch with two mayors on both sides of the border, and from a political point of view, those who were in charge of the district, members of parliament and members of the French Senate, were also in touch with the doctors' organization. So there was a first statement that was made in 1996. In 2007, we strengthened this effort, and then a framework agreement was signed in 2014 between France and Spain in order to set up this EGTC. We chose this format because we wanted to set up a cross-border hospital and also set up a healthcare network in the Cerdanya region. Because of the Pyrénées Treaty, this region was cut in two, and this project has allowed us to get together. We are faced with similar issues, and this is the reason why both territories were interested in this project. We are talking about 33,000 people in this area. And this EGTC allowed us to have a cross-border hospital in 2014 with an exceptional funding provided by the EU, 18,600,000 euros, approximately 60% of the total cost. We are talking about an area in the Pyrenees region that is at an altitude of 1,300 meters, and otherwise we would never have been able to have such an offering in terms of healthcare. We also have a maternity ward. We're talking about a mountain area, and in the past, some women would sometimes give birth on the road, and together with the various organizations, we're able to set up this cross-border hospital. I'm in charge of the board. But in the beginning, elected representatives were not allowed to be members of the board. This is why we created this advisory body. And at the time, we were told, well, you're not competent, so you cannot take part in the organization of this hospital. And we wanted to make sure that this hospital would be rooted in our region, and this is why we decided to create this advisory board. Obviously, there were some issues, and we were able to solve many of them. We still have issues to be solved, such as that of the status of the employees. Because if you work at the hospital, if you're employed directly by the hospital, then it's Spanish law that applies. But if you work as a service provider, then it depends on whether you are on the French side or the Spanish side. It could be Spanish law or French law. Then this means that things are not necessarily harmonized in terms of retirement, etc. And also, we have to really remember that you have to declare birth. People who are born. For example, if you are born at that hospital, if you're a French citizen, you will be seen as someone who was born abroad, and we would like those children to really be considered as being from that territory. And in the French-Spanish summit, for example, we've been able to solve some of the issues, but there are still many issues that need to be solved, and we would like to really talk about them. We also would like that hospital to have a European status. We deeply believe that Europe should be more present within our hospital. It should be there at the level of the board, throughout the organization of the hospital, because it's a great project. There's still a lot to be done, but we really want this hospital to be more than just an experimental hospital. We want this to be a model that can be reproduced elsewhere, because Europe, as I said, it's about curing people, and this is the Europe that we want, isn't it? And it also gives a positive image to our populations.
So there were a number of questions this morning regarding this. There's a question for you right now. Does this hospital as a COVID-19 hospital for French patients? Yes, yes. We have a COVID-19 unit in the hospital, and it's accessible to French and Spanish people and patients. And every day there is statistics that are published, and we have integrated them in the statistics for Pyrénées-Orientales. For the French part of the hospital, there are about 12 beds that are available. When there are very serious cases of COVID-19, the patients can be transferred to Perpignan or Foix for French people, but we have a COVID-19 unit in the hospital with all the medical equipment that is necessary, because it is a very highly qualitative. It's very interesting for our viewers to know that we can have hospitals on the border. Zoltán, Bara, we continue with you. You are the director of the EGTC Pons Danubii between Slovakia and Hungary. And there are a number of questions of what happened during the COVID crisis, because number of borders closed in the east of Europe. Was it the case? Were there obstacles to mobility on the one side? And do you think that your EGTC is impacted by the crisis today? How does it work for you at the moment?
Hello, greetings from the Danube. Yes, unfortunately, the COVID situation has a deep impact on the work of the EGTC Pons Danubii on the border between Slovakia and Hungary. We have several projects. I mean, there are a lot of meetings, there are a lot of workshops, conferences going on. Of course, everything went to the internet. Everything is offline. And well, we have a specific case here. It's the border area between Hungary and Slovakia. I'm sitting like within 1 kilometer from the border right now, and this area has always been characterized by a huge flow of workforce across the Danube, mostly from Slovakia to Hungary, but in the last years, vice versa as well. Before the 2008 crisis, there were 25,000 people crossing the border daily for work. After a crisis, it shrank to lower numbers, but still it affects the everyday life of thousands of people in our region. and it affects the cooperation on the level of firms, companies, municipalities, and the people themselves. The situation is changing every day. In the past 2 weeks, we had testing all over in Slovakia, which was quite a unique case. Almost 4 million people were tested in Slovakia. And we have to follow the news every day because within 2 days, there are coming new and new restrictions in Hungary. So I think the people who live so close to the border, we had some good news coming from this region. There has been a new bridge built, which was put into service this year in summer, but unfortunately it cannot be used to its maximum. So it's a new bridge across the Danube. But for people who work here and who go to work every day, it's still a huge problem. We have to follow the news to have the right information.
We have today an overview of everything that is happening. Thank you for your information. Now we're going to the Austria-Italia border with you, Sandra Sodini, Director of International Relations of Friuli, Venezia, Giulia region, and you are a member of this EGCT, Euregio Senza Confini. Were there a particular problem between Austria and Italy, which are historically very close to each other, those two countries, Austria and Italy? Was the question of closing down the borders, or the question of lack of mobility, obstacles in mobility, was it something that was felt during the crisis, the health crisis, but also the economic crisis?
Thanks a lot. First of all, let me thank you for having invited me in this workshop. It's very interesting. And I would like to focus on the first wave. The first wave was really very hard for the border, since everybody were unprepared. And we, of course, didn't know anything about the COVID-19. For this reason, the first wave in May and in March, April and May was really a very, very hard conditions for the borders. I have to say that thanks to EGTC, and above all, thanks to having a consolidated structure, an organization that was already established between the three regions, Friuli, Veneto, and Carinthia, we had a great and very helpful organizations, above all on the health sector. At the beginning of the crisis in Italy, you know, we had a lot of problems. And thanks to the support of Carinthia, we really had the opportunity to have a partner that gave us the first support in masks, hygienic, all the sanitary issues, and also gave us the opportunity to move some patients in their hospital in Klagenfurt. Of course, it was not necessary at the time, but it was really, really very important to have such a cooperation in that period. During the second wave, in this moment, I have to say that the border is really not so closed as it was in the first. We had learned, therefore we have organized ourselves both as regions, as EGTCs, and probably we have a lot of exchange of information and setting up of some day-to-day experiences that, of course, we need and we are very useful to be in a region during the second wave.
Alors effectivement, et puis nous partons aussi vers une autre frontière, encore une, Jorg, Saalbach.
We're now moving to another border, Jorg, Saalbach. Today we are talking about the Rhine-Alpine corridor, your EGCT, between Switzerland, Germany and Italy. You too have had the impact of COVID-19, and I'm back from this border where I was recently, and it was very important to have it open because the cross-border sector has an impact on the health sector in Switzerland, the agricultural sector as well in France. Is it something that happened? Was there cooperation and cohesion in the region?
Well, we're actually not a typical cross-border EGTC, as I will explain later. So indeed, we have many cross-border situations along our long stretch of the Rhine-Alpine corridor. So what bothered us most, like in other parts of Europe, I have to say, is that transport and mobility were hindered and blocked. This is true not only for passenger trains and passenger public transport, but also for freight. And we all have heard about long lines of waiting trucks at the border, for example, from Germany to Poland. And also there between adjacent regions, so really cross-border, passenger flows and freight flows have been blocked. So this is one thing we have to state, and so there remains a lot to do for our EGTC in order to get things straight. And for example, the supply chains I want to mention in particular, the supply chains, which are of course of great importance for the economy in Europe, they have been also hindered by the virus. And one thing, there are rumors that even train drivers, not truck drivers, but train drivers refused to cross the border towards Italy in spring. So can you imagine that? So as I said, there's a lot left to do for us.
On entend cela, des frontières, borders that are more or less closed. It depends on the cooperation between countries. It depends on what happens with goods and people, whether it is opened or not. There are regulatory obstacles that can't be overcome, and also it's difficult to really make a different health system work together, also economic systems work together. There are a really big difference between the regulation. So do you think that there is a new impulse for the EGCT, or do you think that after the crisis there could be a threat to the EGCTs? Is it what you fear?
Isabelle Boudineau, puisque vous avez cette vision.
Isabelle Boudineau, that's you have this vision of what happens at the coordinating level. Is it what you were talking about, this new impulse with a large number of EGCT being created, or when you hear what has been said this morning or this afternoon, do you think that new obstacles are being created, and is there a threat? Are you worried? No. Really, what I wanted to say is that this crisis showed something clearly. And what it showed is that EGCTs are useful and cross-border cooperation is useful when it comes to health. It's important. This morning you had the president of a big Grand Est region, Mr. Rotert, and with him we were invited by lands in Germany, in Saarland, and we talked about the opening of the border and the transfer of patients between the regions that were touched by the COVID crisis. This was something that was really useful, absolutely necessary. In Mulhouse, for example, the staff in hospitals were exhausted, and we have to thank once again the German authorities for allowing us to transfer patients in their hospitals. This was something truly awesome from them. And there were all other things that should be put in place. The fact that right at the beginning we didn't help Italy, and that China was actually sending masks, that really impacted the credibility of Europe. And this happened in the first few days of the crisis, but fortunately Europe could repair all of that, and I think that we've seen that Europe really learned its lessons, and there was a giant leap with the recovery plan, with common debt that it will be issued. And when it comes to the EGCTs, we are going forward and we can't go back. Even in France, a country that is highly centralized, where everything is decided in Paris, we've seen that the regional health agencies in France were not enough to deal with the crisis, and that they needed to work with the regions in France. And in the south of France, we have an EGCT with parts of Spain, and what we see there is that it's added value at the European level. Cross-border cooperation truly shows that things are better when we work together. Mr. Senator François Calvet, you talked about the fact that you could solve a problem at the bilateral level, and that maybe is the problem. Yes, the problems can be solved at the bilateral level. This can be done quickly, but maybe it goes against the European dimension of what those EGCTs want to do. Europe, is it that wants to create new tools? Can it really be successful when at the moment it is the national states on both sides of the border that are deciding? And you've said it about your hospital on the Spanish border. Yes, when it comes to health, it is a competency that is at the national state in Europe, and it is very important for the French and Spanish state. And this is a national competency, and when you want to tinker with it, obviously there are difficulties, because this health competency is really concrete. For example, with new births and deaths, with corpse transfer, those problems exist at the level of the hospital, and states are reluctant to abandon their sovereignty. You have to go back to procedures that are too long and do not answer the needs of the population. So this cross-border hospital was truly extraordinary for the population. They had a maternity yard 3 kilometers away rather than 100 kilometers away going to Perpignan. And you could have surgery, emergency services. We are creating a new common emergency service for both countries. It's something that's extraordinary. And intellectually, it's also something that's really interesting. And you can transfer it to many other things. We work on heritage. We work on rivers as well, mountain rivers, which are linking our territory. And what's important is to link territories, to link citizens who live in those territories and have the same day-to-day life. And Europe gave us this chance to do it through the EGCT. I never thought that it was something possible because I knew the border in the past, and at that time everything was difficult. But what Europe allowed us to do, to have this hospital 1,300 meters high, it's something that we couldn't have done without Europe and without the EGCT, and I think that's truly essential. But what I wanted to say as well is that this hospital will be able to develop it in a research type sector as well, and as a university hospital as well. So when you create something, you can add to it, and this allows our territory, our mountain territories, to have also brains, because those territories, they often are left by young people, and this is thanks to Europe. We have the joint laboratory in the hospital, and we also created it with a solar oven very close to the hospital. Those things are very important, and this cooperation, if it happened earlier in health, then we could have maybe fared better in the fight against deindustrialization. So this is something that is essential. We should really work together, be open, be tolerant, and also accept the different opportunities that that are existing and appearing. And I think that it is truly important. It is important for the population, but also for elected officials. We can have two different systems. In Spain, for example, the system is different. The doctors are not independent, and in France they are independent workers. But we can work together. But the national state always has to say, because when we have doctors who want to work in the hospitals, they need to have authorization by each country, and the country, the state, Spain in this case, has to give an authorization for this hospital. He needs an authorization from Madrid. So there are always small obstacles, and the state, I think, are late. Your neighbor on the video, I'll show the video with all the guests, is not very close to you. It's the Danube region, but you're close on the screen. And Danube can be seen as a border, a land border, but it was also seen more and more as a bridge, because this idea of bridges is important in Europe. And Zoltán, Bara, you were talking about all of the problems ever since the beginning of the COVID crisis to really promote openness. You said that we are an open continent. Is one of the lessons that you learn from the crisis is that this opening up has to be strengthened, or is it going backward maybe in Central Europe from your point of view? What do you think?
Pons Danubii, hein, donc Zoltán.
I'm talking to Zoltán Bara.
Monsieur Bara.
The question for you. Can you hear me?
Je vous demandais, je vous redemandais.
I was asking you. On the Danube, are we building bridges, or do you think that this idea of destroying and cancelling borders. Is it an idea that will be promoted in the future, or will we go back and will we confine and lock down ourselves behind our borders?
We hope that we can return to the open borders. We have a very bad and long memories of extremely closed borders. When I was 10 years old, I could cross the border like 2 times a year. It was socialism around here, communism. And unfortunately, so we still have living memories of that. Some of my parents still slow down when crossing the border because they have it in their memory. But we got used to the open borders. We had the largest celebrations in our region around the Schengen, the opening of the Schengen area between Hungary and Slovakia. And yeah, with the COVID, we could see that the borders came back to the workplace, between families, between people, companies, municipalities. So it's the aim of all the people living in the region to get back to what we perceive as normal, to normality when the borders do not physically exist. Still, even with open borders, we have a lot of things to do. There are still borders in the mentality, there are still legal obstacles and all other cases. And now we have the COVID case with the physical borders coming back into our life. What we see is that we somehow have to see the end of it, and when planning all our activities, and our activities are mostly concentrated on the work with companies and the work with municipalities, with tourism and built and natural heritage. For example, tourism has stopped all along the Danube, as everywhere else in Europe, but we still have the natural and the built cultural heritage around here that we want to work with, deal with. So when planning for the future, we hope that these barriers, these physical barriers, will be over and we can continue in our work, because open borders are a new thing in our life. We had decades when the borders were extremely closed, and we hope that in the next coming decades we will have open borders as well.
Sandra, Sodini, you are of the Euro region Senza Confini between Austria and Italy. What do you expect from European authorities and member states when it comes to allowing better action at the local level and in everyday life when it comes to providing services for citizens in Europe, whether it is on one side of a border that is invisible inside of a Schengen area?
I have to say that borders are not invisible, unfortunately. Borders are very, very visible. Above all, if we talk about administrative and legal procedures and obstacles. First of all, I would like that the cross-border mechanism, the European cross-border mechanism that DG Regio, the European Commission, has proposed for the programming period 2021-2027 will go on in its approval, and it will become a regulation of the European Union, because today EGTC are some islands in a national level, but unfortunately without a cross-border legislation. We have to live in a national legislation, of course, providing services or investments and a lot of actions on both sides of the borders. And every time we have to be very creative to understand how to move ourselves in the framework of different legislative frameworks. So what I would like that the European institutions will permit, will develop for the forthcoming period is the European cross-border mechanism to be active and alive in in a shortest time. Second, the role of EGTC could be also, in my opinion, discussed in the conference for the future of Europe. We know that this conference had some problems for the COVID crisis, but it's the place where the new Europe is invented. And it's very important that the conference will be open to the EGTC, and it's very important that the conference for the future of Europe will think to a role for the EGTC. And these two actions are, in my opinion, very important for the future of our organizations.
Alors, effectivement, toujours avec nous, donc Jorg Saalbach, vous parlez d'un...
So indeed, we have with us Jorg Saalbach. So your grouping is over 3 countries, which obviously multiplies all the issues by 3 in this Rhine-Alpine corridor. How do you see things for the future? Do you think that with the future of the European Union, there will be a strengthening of this cross-border cooperation after the pandemic, maybe also after this migration crisis or those terrorist issues that we are also having in some countries? So do you believe that there will be a future of the EU in which the role of those groupings will be more important?
Well, first of all, I'm positive in that respect, but let me just, may I correct you at this stage? You're mentioning for the second time that we are 3 countries in our EGTC. In fact, it's 6 countries. So it's not only, it's Belgium, it's the Netherlands, it's France, it's Germany, it's Italy, and last but not least, the third country state, Switzerland. So it's we are cooperating in a long stretch in this Rhine-Alpine corridor between the Mediterranean Sea in the south, so from Genoa up to the Northern Sea, Rotterdam, all along the Rhine, crossing the Alps, 1,300 kilometers of distance between our members in the extreme. For us, the COVID crisis, as we are mainly involved in transport matters, has shown that there are still many barriers. Language barriers, cultural barriers, technical barriers if it comes to trains and locomotives, administrative barriers, legal barriers. So between our members, we are positive that with thanks to our EGTC, we can articulate our thoughts and our perspectives to the national and to the European level in order to get things easier and to provide a seamless way of transport and a seamless way of mobility in Europe, because this is for the existence of European cooperation and the European spirit very important to have the technical means to move beyond borders for freight and also, of course, for persons, for passengers. So we're quite optimistic, but there are still remains a lot of work to do, and we're glad that we have with our 25 members, so basically it's regions, provinces, cities and ports, that we can work together in this direction thanks to the EGTC, which we have founded 5 years ago only.
Alors, Isabelle Boudineau, effectivement, question.
Okay, so Isabelle Boudineau, I have another question for you based on the discussion that we've just had. And this is also a question that is asked on Slido. Do we need specific competencies or extended competencies for those groupings? Is there a need for that? Do you believe that we have those competencies for the future? There's another question. Do you think that cross-border citizens will be able to elect directly the president of a cross-border territory that would be a GECT? So it seems that the issue of electing people is always about power, isn't it, Isabelle Boudineau? What do you think? What is your take on this? Well, I don't think there's really nothing against this, but I do not believe, however, that this is what member states have in mind, especially when you think about centralized states who are having a difficult time transferring some of their competences to the regions, delegating some of those powers to the regions. So we might not be quite there yet. That being said, granting or providing those entities with new competencies, obviously, in my view, this is a good step in the right direction. And for many issues, and we are also all thinking about this now, once we have overcome this COVID crisis, I believe we will go back to our first topic, which is the fight against biodiversity and the fight against global warming. When it comes to biodiversity, to global warming, to clean energy, quite often the answers are local answers. They are associated with a catchment area, with a specific region, and there are many decisions that can be made, decisions that have to do with a specific territory, and those decisions will only be efficient if they are adapted to that territory. If there are just decisions that are made in a top-down way, in a highly centralized way, and if the decisions are not necessarily directly adapted to the local circumstances, I'm not sure they will be that efficient. So I don't know how often we will have to re-explain this again and again. It's quite disappointing, disheartening to see that they are still not listening to us, but we have to continue and make the effort, and it's a good thing that we've been able to rely on each other in order to find solutions that member states were not able of reaching. Well, I believe that we have two questions for you, Mr. Calvet. What's the link between Andorra and the Cerdanya hospital? And there is another interesting question. How can we make sure that the voice in the south is better heard? Because we are talking about populations who share the same living area, if you will. So let's talk about Andorra and the Cerdanya hospital first. Well, yes, indeed, there are some links. And the former Minister of Andorra is the person who did the first study for our hospital, and she created the Andorran Social Security Scheme. There were some discussions with doctors, but for now, we don't really have a true cooperation with Andorra, which is I'm aiming for. I hope this will be the case one day. Since 2014, we've come a long way. First, we wanted to really have a good hospital, something that works, something that is also accepted by the patients, by the doctors, including French doctors. So it's a really an everyday effort that we have to make on the ground in order to convince people. So it's easier to build a cross-border cycle path, although it's not always that easy, but it's easier to build a cycle path than a hospital with 64 beds, with a common emergency ward, etc. We signed the first convention, and we're done with the first convention. And the second convention that will be put on the table, we intend to cooperate more with the Andorra hospital, which is 60 kilometers away. So it's not very far away. It's less than a 1 hour's drive. Yes. Well, you're going to be happy because it seems that some people want to work at the hospital. Sometimes it's all kind of offering to work with you. The CC Haute-Garonne is currently preparing its healthcare institution, Maison de Santé. Well, maybe you could get in touch with one another on Slido, because as you can see, people are interested. Well, if I may add something, when we created the EGCT, we decided to restructure all those healthcare centers, Maison de Santé in French Cerdanya, various wards, rehabilitation services, and we also worked on geriatrics. So we wanted to have a unified system, and we wanted also to do something about the retirement home and work together with the geriatrics ward and use the palliative care beds that we already have in order to put them at the disposal of the old care homes that we have on the French side. So no, it was really about having a broader healthcare cooperation. We're not successful in all endeavors. We have to stay modest, but it was a possibility, the opportunity to provide more to our populations. Well, I will ask also the person in charge of the Danube project. This is an important project when it comes to environmental issues. So the EU is asking us to make some efforts for the environment. We have the Green Deal, obviously, that aims at reducing CO2 emissions. So could this also be a priority for the future of your groupings? Is this already a priority? Through the groupings, are you having better results than elsewhere? And am I asking the question to Rhine-Alpine corridor? And I will also ask a question to the Danube area afterwards. Mr. Saalbach, you first. You have to turn on your mic, Mr. Saalbach. We can't hear you. So please click on the button so that we can hear you. There's no sound. We still cannot hear you, sorry. Okay, well, in the meantime, I will give the floor to Mr. Zoltán Bara. So on the Danube River, there seems to be some important pollution issues. So do you have the feeling that this is the right method? Do you think that those cross-border groupings, when they have to meet some clear objectives, and do you have the feeling that they comply with those objectives better? I'm talking about the environment and the Green Deal. No sound either. You have to turn the sound on or your mic on or something. It seems there is a sound issue with all our guests. Is this the case?
Monsieur Calvet, parlez-nous pour voir.
Mr. Calvet, maybe you would like to say a few words? No, we can't hear you either. Oh, yes, we can hear you now. Do you want me to answer the question? Well, maybe yes, you could answer the question. Well, we have a program. When we do a cross-border environmental programs, we use or we apply the European standards. So in our specs, and in order to get the subsidies, we have to do this, but we're very happy to do it. For example, the Velo 8, from Athens to Cadix, and we're going to have all our cycle path plug into this big cycle path around the Mediterranean region, Spain and Italy and France. And we have a program and an association that we belong to, and we have to make sure that we comply with all the requirements of the Green Deal. Also, there is another project that includes some natural parks in France and in Spain. And here again, we also comply with the regulation. So what about the Danube area? So Pons, Danubii. Maybe you'll try and answer the question. Now, Mr. Bara, will be listening to you.
Yes, I hope now you can hear me. The environment has always been a key issue and a cross-border issue here along the Danube. As an EGTC, there are two ways in which we are focusing. This is the development of green and blue ways in the region. It's the states that build, for example, the bridges. It's an interstate issue supported by the EU. But as an EGTC, the municipalities in Slovakia and in Hungary are members. We focus on the green and blue ways. For example, we will celebrate our 10th anniversary of our establishment within a month. Well, we hope that next year we can organize a great conference for it as well. It will be available. So when we started the work on our EGTCs, there were no real bike routes, for example, in the region. Now we have hundreds of kilometers of such infrastructure. And so we work, and these are connected across the Danube as well. So we are developing cross-border greenways, which is a key issue to our environment. And now we are working on, for example, or developing services. Next year, March, we are planning to launch a cross-border bike sharing system in our region, which will be quite unique. So it will be in 9 municipalities on both sides of the Danube. And we have the Danube in our region, and we have big rivers as well. The second biggest river in Slovakia, the Vach, Kumarno, our headquarters, is the meeting point. So we plan to develop transport and tourism and all other specific areas of blue ways which are underdeveloped on the Danube. We are looking at the Rhine, for example, what's happening on the Rhine in Western Europe, and we would like to manage more and more good practices along the Danube as well.
Okay, so you're talking about what is working well, but I'm asking this question to the Rhine-Alpine corridor this time. I know that there are also many discussions around those cross-border projects. Some of them are more polluting than others, and this is a major issue sometimes, isn't it? This reminds me of the discussion between France and Italy to have a train connection in order to connect both countries with this major tunnel. So do you think that having discussions within a grouping is good for the greening of our European Union? So, Mr. Saalbach, what do you think? Or are they major infrastructure projects that lead to lots of discussion that are criticized? So how are things right now?
Can you hear me now? Okay, wonderful. So let me answer to your question, which I heard, but you didn't hear me, concerning the environment and the green issue. In fact, environmental issues are in focus of our work, in fact. So like if it comes to a model shift, we try to move from road to rail, from plane to train. And also we have projects going on where we want to apply more alternative fuels. So we're talking about a hydrogen corridor these days. That's a future, of course. And last but not least, if it comes to nasty impacts like noise, we have also, of course, an interest in to reduce noise caused by traffic, especially by freight trains at nights. And another thing which we are trying to ameliorate is that we better use existing infrastructure, that we better use existing capacities. Because if you think that about 1/3 of the wagon loads of trains is empty, so there's a lot to improve. Also, if it comes to the application of IT tools, there's an enormous chance of improving the efficiency in our corridor without building one kilometer of new road or rail. So that's what we're up for. And you know, our corridor is basically what has been defined by a French geographer, the blue banana, you know, connecting the most dynamic and economically successful regions of Europe. And now we have reinvented a new term. So we went from the blue banana to the green cucumber. So that's, in 2 words, what we are trying to do.
Les deux, on le voit derrière vous, hein. Les deux conviennent parfaitement.
So yeah, we are seeing this just behind you. You can see the shape. No, it's a very good name for it. So greening is a very good thing. It's a very interesting topic. I also would like to ask our Italian friend, Sandra Sodini, about what those groupings can do, what kind of contribution they can make to the EU, what kind of experience they can contribute, the lessons you've drawn, and the lessons that you've drawn at the European level more broadly. What kind of impetus should be given to this European level? What should you tell, the EU? This is what we've taken away from those experiences. This is what you should do. This is what you should put forward, because it is really important for our citizens.
Well, on my opinion, EGTC is a great challenge for Europe. Why? When I started to work in cross-border cooperation, and I started 25 years ago, more or less, in a very difficult border between Yugoslavia and Italy. We are talking about the 90s, and we had no services together. We had no investments together. We were on the Iron Curtain, so it was really a very difficult situation. Thanks to Interreg, we started to know each other. We started to exchange best practices, to create network, to understand each other, and also to have mutual trust in each other. And these 30 years of Interreg were really very important for this. With the EGTC, we have a second level of cooperation, because while Interreg is promoting projects and partnerships, but not stable partnerships. And many times the project starts and ends. The job that EGTC are developing day by day is to have a stable organizations that can be considered the bricks of the future European wall. Interreg, of course, was important, is important, but we have to go beyond. And this beyond, on my opinion, can be invented, creating a role for EGTC that are stable organization, I repeat, and they can provide services as Cerdanya hospital demonstrate, investment as the railway demonstrate, not as a project lasting 2 years, but as a strategy that lasts for 20, 30, 40 years. And this is what Europe needs now, a vision not for 2, 3 years, but a long-lasting vision for the future.
Merci à tous d'avoir très bien illustré effectivement ces diverses
Thank you very much for talking about those initiatives. It really shows how diverse those groupings are. Now we are going to award the 2020 EGTC Award. Isabelle Boudineau will do this. You have the floor, Isabelle, because you are the coordinator, and I will let you hand over this award.
Oui, alors c'était la première qui était greffée à ce,
yes, indeed.
à ce forum. Par contre, elle a déjà eu lieu, elle s'est déjà tenue au comité des régions, puisque en réalité,
the first ceremony, but at this forum, but this award has already been awarded 3 times. It is awarded every 2 years. And by the way, my region was also a laureate for a transportation award. We haven't really talked about transportation issues, but cross-border transportation really is an area in which EGTCs are really efficient. This award really shows how much of a leverage effect those EGTCs have. They are good for jobs, they are good for the environment, they also promote education, social inclusion, heritage, buildings, and also European citizenship, which is also a very important aspect of this cross-border effort. The award aims at thanking the EGTC, recognizing the EGTC for its contribution. And it also highlights all the projects undertaken. For this 2020 award, we received 15 candidacies. It was difficult to choose, but after long discussions, we chose the Eurodistrict Pamina EGTC. Pamina is for South Palatinat, Mittelrhein, Oberrhein, and Northern Alsace. This Eurodistrict, Pamina, got its project Passepartout Weltenbummler that is receiving this award. Young children can discover this Eurodistrict. They get to learn the language of their counterparts. It also promotes intercultural exchanges and also cross-border school exchanges. I will let Mr. Patrice Aster take the floor, and he's going to talk about his project together with Victoria Heinzem. So you have the floor, and I obviously congratulate you. Yes, good afternoon. I also would like to say hello to my friend Jorg Saalbach. We started building Pamina together in 1991, so almost 30 years ago. Isabelle Boudineau, I would like to thank you. Obviously, I'd like to thank the Committee of the Regions also. And I also would like to thank the members of the jury. As you said, it's probably difficult to choose and we're very pleased that we were awarded this prize. This project is aimed at promoting bilingualism between France and Germany in the Upper Rhine region. It is mostly aimed at primary school children aged 8 to 11. It's also a digital game, which is very good during the current COVID crisis. Now, if people are stuck at home with their children, well, children can play the game on their computers, either by themselves or with someone else. We've had 3,000 kids taking part in this project over the past 3 years. Teachers also were trained, and there were approximately 500 challenges during those 4 years. So that you know, it was financed by the INTERREG program, the Upper Rhine INTERREG program. So it's always very important to benefit from this European funding. How did we come about with this idea? We first did a board game with Czech and Polish partners, and it's a board game that our teachers really liked it and asked us to turn it into a video game, a computer game. This is what we did. And we've turned this board game into a digital game with 3D images. It's very, very nice from a technical point of view. I also would like to thank the teachers who have volunteered a lot of their time. I also would like to thank everyone in the schools who have taken part in this project. It was difficult to implement, was a bit complicated because it wasn't always easy to negotiate with education authorities, but we succeeded. I also would like to thank Victoria Hansen, who unfortunately is not attending or taking part in this presentation today, but I know she's listening to this. Thank you for her exceptional commitment. And to conclude, we will also do this for other cross-border territories. It's currently an open source software. You can use it, you can develop it for your own border areas. And I think this is highly symbolic for the European Union. Everyone will be able to use it. Thank you. As for the trophy and the diploma, they will be sent to you by mail. It's quite unfortunate that we are not able to do this together today. One last thing, we also have an honorable mention that is given to the EGTC Eurometropolis Lille-Kortrijk tournée for its project called Europe, I love you, but I don't love you. And I will let the person in charge of this Eurometropolis project, I'll let you pronounce the words properly, Lille-Kortrijk tournée. And I also would like to congratulate you, and you're going to tell us what you did. It seems there is a sound issue. Still no sound? No.
Alors, juste glisser quelques mots sur ce projet en attendant peut-être d'entendre Loïc. Et l'objectif de ce projet est de creuser l'écart entre les citoyens.
So the goal of the project is to bridge the gap between the citizen and the European institutions and to talk about Europe. This is a project that was implemented through citizen consultations with hundreds of participants, and also through social media. This EGCT reached 200,000 people, and this was also covered by the media. It was, when it comes to European citizenship, a project that was very interesting to us. Loic, we could hear you. Can you hear me? Everything is good? Yes, sorry. I'm very happy. Thank you very much for this award in the name of all the Eurometropole members and in the name of the President, Rudy Demotte. We launched these consultations after the call from the President of the Republic in April 2018, and with the EGCT, Eurometropole, we decided to organize it, but not as a one-shot, but by constructing a dialogue with the citizens of the Eurometropole. Through this experience, we were able to reach for a year about 300 citizens in the cross-border region, and we were able as well to create in 2021 a citizen space, a European citizen space. It is a space for dialogue between citizens in the long term, but not just before the European elections as it is often done. So this European citizen space will really unite 3 regions, but also 2 states, France and Belgium, and will allow us to work in an innovative way on this question, because those living areas are really interesting tools at the European level, but they are there to serve the citizens of the cross-border regions, and that's why we want to create this permanent dialogue between the European authorities and the citizens of the Eurometropolis. So we are launching this citizens space in 2021, and we will organize a dialogue between 10 personalities of the European institutions, and they will talk with a number of people who will be chosen in our territory. And the idea is to go beyond mental borders, and also to be able to talk with people that don't usually talk about European issues. So that's what we want to do. It's a new approach to European citizenship. And what I wanted to say to end is to thank everyone, thank my team that worked to create this new citizen space so that everyone can understand Europe, and they wanted to create a new vocabulary that takes into account all the citizens. And thank you to them, and thank you for this honorable mention. Thank you again. Well, I'm giving the floor back to the moderator. I know that we don't have a lot of time. I would like to congratulate both laureates, and to say that hopefully in 2 years we will be able to have this award ceremony in person. So it is the end of this ceremony and of this first round table of the afternoon. Thank you to all our guests for describing their work. We will be back at 4 for our last talk of the afternoon with really high level people. It's at 4. We hope you will be with us for questions. Thank you.